Hello and welcome to the Pipeline Industries Guild's PDN webinar. Hope you're all well. Today, the Professional Development Network are lucky enough to be joined by Elisha Walters. Hi, Elisha.
Hi, Ash.
Elisha is one of our regional presentation finalists who competed in the Sir John Parker competition back in March 2020 and has kindly joined us today. So without further ado, Elisha, the dance floor is all yours.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So my presentation today is about the relationship between ecology and the pipeline industry. More specifically, how ecology could be your pipeline project's biggest risk. I'm going to start with a quick intro and some background about myself. So I'm Elisha, and I'm currently studying towards my mechanical engineering degree. I'm also currently on an industry placement with Severn Trent Water, mainly working within the project management team for the clean water infrastructure projects, such as trunk mains, mains renewals, and resilience projects. I have always had an interest for biodiversity, sustainability, and the growth of the relationship between engineering and the natural world. So this is why this subject particularly catches my attention and interest. I would like to highlight that I'm by no means an ecologist or a specialist within this subject, and therefore this is an overview from a project management and an engineering point of view. As previously mentioned, I am an engineer by background, and therefore when I first started to see how ecology was affecting project timelines and how it was sometimes one of the biggest risks in terms of staying on programme, I wanted to break it down like I was taught to manage any risk: identifying, assessing, controlling, and lastly reviewing. Identifying. So I was attending project meetings and planning sessions and hearing newts being mentioned a lot. And at first I thought I heard wrong, especially when newt handlers and newt sniffer dogs are being mentioned. I genuinely thought it might have been a bit of a joke, because this certainly wasn't something I learned about in university. Assessing the risk. I needed to know why this was becoming a risk first, and therefore I started to learn more about protected species laws and regulations, and started to read the preliminary ecological appraisal reports. I began to analyse exactly what was causing the delays. From assessing the risk, I was able to see how the risk could be controlled, and this was mainly through awareness, education, and pre-planning. Lastly, I needed to review these control measures. I was working on a project that was at the early stages, and I wanted to try and see if through what I have found, I was able to mitigate the risks somehow. So what is ecology? Well, it's formally known as the branch of biology that deals with the relations of organisms to one another and to their physical surroundings. But to me, and I'm sure to a lot of us in the pipeline industry, it's bats, species of birds, hares, rabbits, frogs, and of course, great crested newts. So what is its relationship to pipeline projects? Well, quite simply demonstrated here. If your prospective pipeline route is planned to go through a rural area, or in fact any area where there might be ponds, trees, habitat-rich land, hedgerows, tall grass, the list goes on, then you need to undertake ecological surveys to make sure that not only are you going to protect the biodiversity in that area, but also to make sure you won't be breaking any laws, rules, or regulations relating to any protected species. Why is ecology a risk to project timelines then? Well, it's more about the process you have to go through and the steps you have to take in order to make sure you are protecting the species and their habitats, rather than the surveys or the species themselves. On this slide, I've outlined some of the steps that I'm aware of that you need to complete. I'm hopefully going to demonstrate a little bit how delays can start to occur. So firstly, you have to have a preliminary survey completed. You need to organise a registered ecologist to visit your planned pipe route or construction area to survey that area. Certain times of years, ecologists can be overloaded with walkover jobs, and therefore it can't be left to last minute or expected in your programme, that they will just turn up within a week or two. Additionally, you have to have the correct land access, for example, if you need third-party land. Therefore, again, you could run into problems. So from the very first step, it is important to have a very well planned out programme to mitigate for this, and a line of communication with the ecology consultant and your land and planner team early in the project is key. So the preliminary ecological appraisal report, the PEA, is then written. This report is not only based on the walkover, but is partly data from a desktop study. Again, this is another activity that needs to be put into your programme. However, you are able to carry on with other works within the project parallel to this, so for this stop, as long as you are aware of it, it shouldn't be a cause for delay. From the report, you will then more than likely be given further surveys that need to be completed. This is based off if there was any visual evidence of possible protected species nearby, but also the data from the desktop study that includes if there are any nearby SSSIs, ponds, or impact zones. These further surveys will have specific time periods that they need undertaken in, so it will need to be organised and again built into the programme. Your project will not be able to go to site until these surveys are completed and any impact or danger or harm is mitigated. A licence might be needed. If this is the case, then you will need to help your ecologist put together an application to the relevant governing body. It will set out what you plan to do, why you need to do it, why there are no other feasible options with less direct impact, and it needs to include a method statement on the mitigation strategy. The mitigation strategy needs to be planned and programmed, and it might include even more further surveys to be completed. Finally, it can take Natural England 30 working days to process a licence, so this is extremely important to be aware of. So I would just like to go back to the preliminary survey, as this is what will be your basis of your ecology and environmental programme for your project. It is 50-50 part walkover survey and desktop study. The registered ecologist will then write a report called the Preliminary Ecological Appraisal, the PEA. And within this report, you will be given the further survey recommendations, and they also might suggest the mitigations that will need to be put in place. Going into another level into this, just an overview of the desktop and walkover survey themselves. So the desktop study will mainly be the relevant data gathered from a huge database which is mostly open to the public. And you can do very similar searches yourself using a website called Magic. It shows you a vast amount of information including impact zones, nearby sites of scientific interest, historical mappings, the geology in the area, if there's any contaminated land, animal sightings, and lots more. This is managed by Natural England, and therefore it contains any information they'll be looking at also. You can operate Magic by turning on and off relevant layers. It's a very useful tool. The walkover. So the walkover again is where a registered ecologist visits the site and walks the pipeline corridor and visually surveys the areas for possible ecological issues. But let's not forget, they can also look for ecological opportunities as well. There might be opportunities for ecological enhancements. They will assess any ecological risk associated for that site. I think it's important to understand why we need to complete these surveys in the first place, and I'm going to go into a little bit more depth with a couple of examples of protected species. So 2 species that I have seen pop up on many projects are badgers and great crested newt further surveys. For badgers, there is the Protection of Badger Act 1992. A few key points from this act are, it makes it an offence to injure or kill a badger, disturb a badger while it's in its set, or interfere with a badger set. Straight away you can see how maybe without even knowing it, you could be causing an offence, just from the vibrations from your machinery that disturbs the set. Without knowing that there aren't any sets in the near vicinity of the pipeline corridor, you could also easily interfere with badger sets. Therefore, it's important we take necessary measures to make sure we mitigate any risk as best as we can, and why these acts, regulations and laws are put in place in the first place. So great crested newts are a legally protected species under the UK and European law. Even low levels of disturbance to ponds where great crested newts are found can be deemed unlawful. It is against the law to damage or destroy a breeding or resting place, and further to this, against the law to obstruct access to their resting or sheltering places. So again, you can see whether it's just placing a pipeline in between the hibernation and breeding areas, or removing a section of hedgerow that has great crested newts hibernating within the root balls, it will be deemed unlawful. This is an ecology survey calendar I made in a Gantt chart fashion for a specific project I was working on. There are ecology survey calendars out there, but I needed one that was specific to the project. I was working on this and it allowed me to see an overview of how the surveys would slot together. This would also allow me to see how it would fit into the programme. These dates are not 100% set in stone, and they vary a little depending on the source. But roughly, I set out the periods in terms of optimal, suboptimal, and no survey periods. I also found this is something that the ecologists would tend to include in the PEA report, and also they would normally contact you with a breakdown of the surveys needed and when. So always go with your registered ecologist as advising. So I'm going to walk through an example of a specific survey. For this example, I'm going to use our friend, the great crested newt. So the great crested newt has a lot of pinky red blocked out in this calendar. In fact, it has around 2/3 of the year associated with no surveys. This is due to newts hibernating throughout the winter and the cold months. You cannot move or handle newts during hibernation. After they come out of hibernation, they return to the ponds to breed again in around March and remain there until about June. The active breeding season is why these surveys can only be conducted March to June, as their peak period is the middle of April to middle of May. So, if you are not aware of this and your scheme has a likelihood of great crested newts being present in the area, and you realise this in, say, July, your project will then be delayed until Feb next year earliest, maybe even March depending on the weather. Councils will only grant permission once all protected species surveys have been undertaken and to show the presence or absence of great crested newts. Additionally, newt surveys are not straightforward. I won't go into this too much detail today, as you could easily have a whole presentation on the matter alone. However, for presence-absence surveys, 4 visits are required to determine the presence, and if newts are found, then this is extended to a total of 6 visits to establish the population size, and all within that tiny window. So if you do figure out that you need newt surveys in June, the fact that you need to get 4 or 6 visits in between July is quite a tight process. So this itself could qualify as a risk within its own right, as again, it could cause 8 months, possibly a year delay. Delays to works in utility companies can affect not only the business, but also the customers, so it's important we mitigate this risk as much as possible, and pre-planning and awareness is key. So I've only touched on one species in this calendar, but projects commonly have several more to do, so again, you can see how this stacks up and results in being a serious risk in terms of timelines and programs for projects. So I'm going to go through an overview of what types of mitigating strategies could be used. A common mitigation used for great crested newts is to have ecologists who are trained to handle the newts and are licensed to move them to an alternative, safer place if they are found during construction, are a key one. Another strategy is to avoid cutting hedgerows down where possible. This is because certain hedgerows need you to send off an application to be approved by the council, and also hedgerows are used for newts as a walkway, so you could possibly need a newt licence to remove them, and it won't be able to do this during winter months if great crested newts are suspected to be hibernating there. If hedgerows are needed to be removed, then you can have newt fencing placed around the edges to guide newts away from the pipeline trunk so they don't fall in. And if necessary, badger sets can be relocated, but this is a last resort as it is a lengthy process and will and should be avoided where possible. A final note on the licence applications. So here I have a small snippet of the header for the Great Crested Newt licence. I spoke about the application a little bit earlier in the presentation, so I won't go into it in too much detail. Is an important part that will allow you to move forward with the project though. As noted before, it typically takes Natural England 30 working days to process a licence application. That's 6 weeks. So if Natural England does not approve and wants you to add more to your mitigating strategy, for example, you might have to then reapply, and it could cause a possible further 6+ week delay. So the key points there are there needs to be a named registered ecologist on the application, a clear method statement, and a reason why there are no other feasible options that cause less disruption. Of course, your registered ecologist has filled out many of these, so it is something that they fill out, but I think it is important for us as project managers and engineers to be aware of what information we need to put in and what we are sending off to Natural England. So I'd like to just summarise this presentation, which key messages that I wanted to put forward today. So if your project does need environmental and ecology surveys, then this could be a risk within your project relating to your timelines. However, it is a risk that can be mitigated massively, and this is by small amounts of extra knowledge in the area and forward planning. This extra knowledge needed involves being aware of different surveys and being proactive in fitting them into your programme. From this, your processes should then become leaner and more efficient. And finally, this is not only benefit in ecology and the environment, but it's benefit your customers and it's benefiting your company. It saves time, cost and resource. So that concludes the presentation today. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you to the Pipeline Guild for giving me the opportunity to once again present on this topic.
Thank you so much, Elisha. That was absolutely brilliant. Really enjoyed that. Very insightful, especially the your integrated ecology survey Gantt chart. I thought that's really something that we probably don't spend enough time in industry reviewing. So yeah, really good point to bring out. It was just a quick one from me, Elisha. I wanted to just ask you, you've reshared this presentation with us today, so we're really grateful for that. I just wondered if you'd be able to, give us a bit of an idea of what you got out of participating in the presentation competition, and would you recommend it to other people like yourself going forward?
Yeah, definitely. I think it is a great opportunity to practice those formal speaking and presentation skills that you might not be able to practice in the workplace, because we all know it's easy to present in front of your work colleagues, and but this was an opportunity to do it in front of a room of people that you've probably never met, and also be able to be put forward in a question and answering, so you get to be put in the spot and actually have a bit of a practice and a bit of a it's just a bit of a practice of what you've been doing, and now you to actually look back and consolidate of stuff you've already learned. And I think it's just such a good opportunity as a young professional to network as well, but more importantly, it's just one of those opportunities that in your career you probably should just give it a go.
Good stuff. No, well, we look forward to keeping in contact with you and staying involved with the Guild, Elisha. So thanks for your time. And on behalf of the Pipeline Industries Guild, thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed this PDN webinar. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.